All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
So hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. I am Emily Morasso, or for the presentation's purposes, you can call me Rose, and I am a second-year residence hall coordinator at West Virginia University.
And my name is Patrick O'Donnell. I am a fifth-year hall coordinator at West Virginia University. And for the purpose of this presentation, you can call me Rick. We work together a lot at WVU. We run our NRHH chapter together. So we usually refer to ourselves as Rick and Rose.
Right. That is correct. And our presentation is called Send Me Your Selections, specifically because that's usually the title of the email that we're all going to get from our supervisor, which is, hey, send me your selections. What are your top choices? And if you read our intro, it kind of read like that as well.
All right, so first thing we want to do is get a read on the room, the amount of people that we have. So, I've got gallery view open. We just asking everybody to take themselves off mute real quick and just introduce yourselves, your name, your institution, years of experience as in whatever your position is. If you've been involved in selections before, how many you've been primarily responsible for. And then I think we have a small enough group that we can do this last part, which is, if you had to pick one word to describe what you're looking for in a hire, what would it be? In my case, the word is friction.
And in my case, the word is teamwork. You good for that, Patrick?
Yep.
All right. We will start going around the room. Can we start with Josh? And if anybody is unable to unmute themselves, you could just throw it into chat. Josh Martinez.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, hello, good afternoon. So yeah, Josh Martinez, he, him pronouns, community director at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Selection is my favorite committee to be a part of. I just enjoy the process. Next year's team. And so I've been a part of that in my professional position here, but also in grad school at James Madison University. And I think that's all of them except for the last question. The one word I would say to hiring a team member would definitely be teamwork as well.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josh.
Dana?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dana. I use she, her pronouns. I am a community director at American University in Washington, D.C. I have been here for a little over a year now, but I have been involved with, probably 3 or 4 rounds of selection throughout my professional and grad times. And I also really enjoy it. And I'm always looking for ways to sort of optimize it, depending on the size of the team, the size of our applicant pool, and all those sorts of things. So I don't know if I can pick one word to describe what I look for. Yeah, I can't pick one word, so I'm gonna just say I don't have an answer for that.
That's okay. Thanks.
Emily.
I'm so sorry. I just walked in, so I'm not really sure what we're doing, but my name is Emily. I work at Felician University. It's a small institution in New Jersey, North Jersey. I've been a resident director here for about 4 years. I've done 5 selections because we did a spring selection once. And we're also doing another spring selection this year. So I think that's most of what you're asking.
Oh, that was perfect. And then one word to describe what you look to hire.
Okay. So my institution is, we're a minority serving population. So we just look to hire very outgoing and diverse students that are really willing to throw themselves in to different cultures and different environments to learn different things. So that's something that's very important to us here at Felician. So that's one of our biggest things that we talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Serena.
Hello, everyone. My name is Serena Studevant. I am an area director at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I have been in residence life for 7 years. I was an RA, and then we have something called a student director. Well, we used to. We have senior RAs now, but I was a RA and a senior RA, and I've been an AD for 3 years now. As far as selection, I assisted with it when I was a RA and a SD, but now I am in charge of it, and I have been for the past 4 rounds. And what I look for is creativity and flexibility, mainly because we're always changing. Things are always changing in residence life, and specifically now because of COVID.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bradley.
Here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Brad Veach. I am a resident director at Temple University. How's it going, Rick? And so what am I answering? Everyone just did. So I've been at Temple now for under a year, but I have been a resident director for about 5 to 6 years now. I've been involved in so many selection processes, but probably going to 8 to 10 selection processes now, but I'm always interested to see what other institutions are doing. If I had to pick a word, it would probably be collaborative.
Definitely. Thanks. David.
How's it going, everybody? David, I am at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, pronouns he, him, his. I have been here for less than a year, been in housing for like 2.5 years. So I've done about 3 rounds of selection so far. If I had to pick, I would just want somebody that I was looking to hire. I would just say somebody that's ready. I know we do a lot of training to help them be even more prepared, but just somebody that's just ready to jump in and be a part of everything that it means to be an RA.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Gianna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gianna. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am currently at the Juilliard School, and I'm actually in student affairs and not housing, but Makuha has my heart, so that's why I'm here. And I have probably worked on about 6 selection processes, and in my current role, the way we do it is my role hires for RAs, OLs, diversity advocates, and like every student leadership role. So that's a lot of hiring, and my ideal teams and my ideal spirit of the kind of person I'm looking to hire is just motivation.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bernadine, and correct me if I said that wrong.
No, you got it right. So my name is Bernadine. I work at Goldie Beacom College. I am the senior coordinator of residence life there. I think I've been working in residence life for about 5 to 6 years now. So I've done about 5 to 6 selection processes. Our college is very small. So up until this year, I was the only full-time person solely in residence life. And then I have a director above me, but they did residence life and student life at the same time. So I'm the only person with the main focus. So mostly it was me and the RAs doing selection, and then me and my director would make the decisions. We recently hired some part-time people, so I'm excited to have the help and the opinions in the process.
Yeah.
And one word I would pick to describe would, it's technically 2 words, so I'm kind of going to cheat, but I would say role model.
Okay.
Like, that's what I really look for. Fishbowl, you got to have it.
Yeah.
Some of us don't have English degrees, so role model is 1 word in my head. Perfect. All right, thank you all.
Thank you all very much. All right, so first things first, we want to cover what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome, we just did introductions. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the learning outcomes that we have for you all for today for our presentation. We'll jump into why Rick and Rose are qualified to talk to you at all about this subject. You know, some folks in here have more selection experience than us, but hopefully there's something that we can all glean from this today. We'll go into the learning outcomes discussion, which is where the meat of this presentation will be. We'll spend most of our time on that. And then timing permitted, you know, we'll probably talk faster than when we practice this, but timing permitted, we have a selection activity and we have time for an open discussion about the impacts of COVID on selection. We'll review those learning outcomes at the end, and then we'll have time for any questions that folks have, okay? All right, so learning outcomes. So you all have seen these. You've probably written a bunch of these at various points in your career, but they always start with attendees will be able to, you know, have a better way to sift through candidates during selection, be able to build a community of RA staffs, be able to have new ways to discuss a candidate within your selection process, and be able to broaden your knowledge on why a specific student works best in a specific community. So every school does selection a little differently, but the goals of selection remain largely the same, which is to build the community for which that student is being chosen. So in this respect, our presentation is relevant no matter your mode of selection. A large secondary point underlying of what we hope that you get out of this today is that our presentation is meant to empower people as, you know, as selectors, as, you know, for hall coordinators that are in here, to see yourselves as part of the agents of change for your building, for the culture of your building. Many first-time professionals come into the job and they think, okay, I just need to make it to next year. I just got to make it through selection, hire my own people, and get my own team in there. And we absolutely, like, we will concede that that is a big part of it. Knowing the purpose of a staff member, knowing why they were hired in the first place, you know, coming in with a knowledge of that person makes a huge difference in your community, but it's not the only factor. So we hope that you get those two things out of this. All right, so why us? Why are we qualified to talk to you today? So I'm Patrick O'Donnell. I worked as an assistant coordinator at Towson University for 3 years for Glen Complex Tower D. And this is the 5th year for me running Braxton Tower at West Virginia University. Here at WVU, I was on the selection committee for 3 years, including last year when I was the chair of the committee. But moreover, in all of that, I've been a part of hiring 88 different individual students to RA or similar level student leadership positions like front desk workers or office assistants or things like that. As well as I've lost track of the work studies at this point, because for them, at least for the jobs that we hire them for, it's mostly like, are they available to work it? Okay, cool, let's hire them.
And I'm Rose, and I'm brand heckin' new. So new. Last year I didn't even get a full year. So I don't even know what it's like to be a full-time professional in an entire year yet. So I'm still waiting on that moment. But I went to grad school at Kent State University from 2017 to 19. I was in 2 different buildings, and then I did the selection process last year with WVU. My first year that I've ever done a selection process when I was a grad student, it took us 8 hours, and it was on my birthday. So I've been through a few different kinds of them. The year after, it only took 25 minutes. And then here at WVU, I did something completely different. So I have seen 3 different ways. However, I know that there are 9 billion different ways to do this, and ways that like 100% of us have never done, which is like completely online and virtual and not even interacting with our supervisors in person about what we're going to do.
Yeah. So we'll get into this more as we go through the presentation. One of the things that you'll learn about us today is that a big part of where we even got this idea to do this presentation.
Yeah, Rick and Rose began when I was actually an undergrad and he was a full-time professional here at WVU. And so I said, wow, WVU is cool. And then I ended up working here 3 years later. So we've known each other for a long time. And we have 2 very high functioning staffs and have positive staff dynamics as well.
Yeah. So we've known each other for all these years. We've been good colleagues. We've done NRHH things together. And then in our first year as a hall coordinator last year in January, we got to hiring and we talked about who we wanted to hire. And we realized that we look for polar opposite things in our hiring processes.
Honestly. So Rick will go with the candidate. Well, Rick doesn't care about administratively strong candidates. He believes that that's something that you can teach. You can teach them to meet deadlines or discipline them until they meet those deadlines, but you can't teach them to be a good person.
Yeah, that is true. And so on the flip side of that, Rose looks for candidates who come in who are already administratively strong. She thinks of it as like, that is the foundation of the structure. Like, you need to come in with a strong foundation and administrative skills, because she doesn't have time to teach you how to meet deadlines or how to be good at filling out paperwork. You need to come in with that as a skill set, because it doesn't matter then if you're super engaging or you're super, you're really charismatic with your students, if you can't do the bare minimum paperwork that our jobs inevitably require of us. She believes that she can build staff cohesion once you've established those people on the team. So you can see these completely different approaches to who we select and how we hire, but it leads to largely the same result. Staff members finding people that are similar to themselves with similar strengths and weaknesses, who form bonds because like that's the nature of the job, right? You get it, like mostly you get along with the people that you work with. And then you're supported by this hall coordinator who really stands behind that philosophy that got them hired in the first place and placed in that community.
Let's get started.
All right, so our first learning outcome is better ways to sift through candidates during selection. So usually this is how the email goes, right? In some form or fashion, it's like this: is here's 200 files, you have 14 days. So you've been asked to review files. You usually have several hundred in a short period of time. Sometimes it's more files than that. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's more than 14 days and sometimes it's less. But generally, that's the kind of mindset that you get in. Is you have to read a lot in a short amount of time.
And of course, throughout this presentation, we, along with probably your supervisors, recommend that all files are read. So more data is better than obviously less data. So reading them yourself, and we'll go into that more, is definitely better than not coming prepared.
Yeah. Now then the question comes up is how do you do all of that? Do you have all these files? How do you get through all of them that quickly? And how do you read everything, in such a packed timeline?
First thing that has helped both of us is knowing what you're looking for. So like a specific word, the words that we used in the beginning. So I said teamwork. If they use teamwork in their application, during their interview, any part of the process, those words are the ones that click for me. So it makes it easier to sift through when you know a few words and you hope you see that. Someone said flexibility, and that was a really good word as well. Knowing those words and just paying close attention to them. Number one piece of advice is decide what you need for your community and then search for those things instead of just reading everything blind.
Yeah, it's important to have some kind of filter and look for those things. So I'll talk about like LLC specific things because I have a lot of experience with this. So if you, and the power that comes with that too. So if you have a living learning community, you may call it, there's all kinds of different, names for it. But if you have some kind of structured learning environment for your students where a specific major or a group of people that identify in the same way, where they live together, usually for the most part, when you get to your selection for those groups for that LLC, there's usually some preferential treatment that is given for those selections from your supervisors. And so there's a couple things that go with that. How do you differentiate those candidates, the ones that want to be in your LLC? I recommend speaking to stakeholders that are involved with that, other community partners, to get a feel for them. So when you do the interview process, when they submit their applications and they edit their resumes, it is all intentionally designed to be exactly what they want you to see. But if they, for an academic based learning community, right, they have professors, they have all these other people that have seen them in different forms or fashions. And so reaching out to their professors, reaching out to your community partners that are involved with that learning community, that can be a great way to gather more information, more data, like we talked about, and get to see another side of them that you haven't heard otherwise. So you also want to ask yourself this important question. This applies to all of selection, but particularly with LLCs, is like, do you want to hire in-house or do you want to get fresh perspectives in the room? So when you hire in-house, you're saying, this is the culture of our building. These people have been here. They've seen these programs. They've seen these events. They've seen what we do here. And we want them to come back and be excited about it. Or, you know, on the other hand, maybe things haven't been as strong as you want it to be, or maybe you just need to change things up. Bringing in a fresh perspective into the room, somebody new who can provide a different view or give new ideas for new programs that you could do. And I highlighted this earlier and mentioned it as like the power of that selection, most of the time anyway, right? So it's cool, it's exciting that sometimes you'll get that preferential treatment in the selection. Some schools, my last school, you would hire LLCs before you would hire anybody else. And so that's awesome. That's very valuable in your selection process for you. But it's important to recognize the political ramifications of that. Selection is a part of the job. It's just something that we do at year in and year out. We have like, it's like clockwork. It's just like opening and closing. Like you have to select for next year, but selection is different. It's inherently very personal when you're working with your colleagues, because we're all trying to build our ideal teams, the perfect people for our community and what we want our students to get out of their experience with us. And so selection becomes very personal. And so if, you know, just keeping that in mind and remembering that in your selection process. And so if you're picking for an LLC, my advice from having done it with, you know, I run an engineering living learning community at WVU. WVU's flagship academic program is engineering. It's why a lot of our students come here. And so it's this huge learning community. And there's a lot of candidates that are engineering majors. There's a lot of power on my plate with that. And so I always recommend, you know, being on top of your selection process, knowing who you're going to hire and making decisions early, alerting your colleagues so they can plan accordingly. All of this to summarize is don't be a jerk. Don't sit on those selections until the very last second and then tell people like, oh yeah, those folks that you really want it, yeah, I'm going to take them. Last year, I knew pretty much, I spent like the first 2 days after we got those materials and I let everybody know, I have one LLC spot. This is who it is. You guys, you know, if you want him, I'm willing to talk about it, but I just want you to know so that if you were interested, know that you'll have to talk to me about it in some way.
Going along with that, every year, without a doubt, we all get annoyed at that one person who just decides, you know what, I'm gonna not read and you tell me what you like and then I'm gonna use that. And we all know that one person. You don't have to do that half smile. I totally know. And they always come with creative ways to try and get the information out of us. And we always find creative ways to tell them, no, I'm not interested. You wouldn't be interested in that person. You don't like that person, trust me. And we don't want you all to do that. I don't want to do that. Sometimes it comes halfway and I'm like, I wonder what everybody else is doing. And in a COVID world, it's just so important that we're doing the work ourselves. We're reading through these, especially when we're not in person, physically doing it. I know here at WVU, this is the first time I've ever done something where we all just get in the same room and we start reading resumes together. Obviously, we're not doing that, but it was helpful. It was a way for me to work in a group, but also remind myself, like, I'm getting my stuff done. So the person next to me is getting their stuff done.
And then, so a really important part of this for sifting through candidates is recognize that you should be, you know, you're selecting for your community rather than who you want to work for or who you want to work with. And so, I think, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but I think I mean, I know I have a type of candidate that I love to hire more than others. I think everybody has a type that they really like and they feel like it's perfect for this job. Like this is it. But that's not always in line with what our communities need or what the job calls for. And so I always give this example. This is my type. I had somebody help me name this a couple years ago. My type is what we call a Little Miss Sunshine. They're not, you know, it's Little Miss Sunshine, but it's not always female candidates, but it's usually an education major who believes that they can change the world. They are my kryptonite. I have to hire them. I have to have these people in my community. I have to be surrounded by them. They're usually bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and think that like they're going to save the world one child at a time. And it just eats me up. I have to hire these people. I can't stop myself. But as I mentioned earlier, I have an engineering living learning community. And so our students have very different needs than what those Little Miss Sunshines bring to the table necessarily. And so that was a real gut check when I started working here that like, hey, you have 18 RAs, 10 of them or more are going to be engineering majors every year that you're here. And so keep these things in mind. Ideally, we get both. We get people that are good for our community and that we like to work with or that we would want to work with. But a lot of times we have to choose. So, and we will leave our positions at some point or another. Our communities will stay largely the same. And so hiring for your community takes precedence over what we want to hire to work, who we want to be surrounding ourselves with.
All right, so building a better community of RA staffs. So we talked about the importance of hiring for our community rather than who we want to work with.
Yeah, it's important to keep community in the forefront of your decision-making processes because like it's always going to come up in selection. And we'll discuss this later on in one of the other learning outcomes, but keeping this in mind helps a lot when you get to hiring conflicts.
Definitely. And once you hire them, they're immediately part of the team.
Rose, can you click so that it shows the thing on the screen?
Totes.
So, however, once we hire them, oh no, she already said that. So how do you keep staffing dynamics in mind when hiring? How do you balance these things?
You're going to first look at your current staff. So look who's returning, look who's leaving. Where are the gaps? You know who's returning and you know those students. What was mending really well? Or maybe what does the community need that maybe was missing last year?
Yeah. And so an important part here is don't try to compare those old RAs that you've had or those old staff members that you've had for years and the really good work they've done with these new candidates. You know, you want to fill in the gaps of the skills, knowledge, and abilities that you're losing, but don't try to compare, you know, your fourth year RA that was your golden child with this new candidate that you are just meeting for the first time or that you're thinking about hiring. Good staffs come in all different, you know, sizes and shapes. And so I've had this experience. I'm sure many of you have as well. This past August during COVID, I had 18 RAs, 17 of them were returners. It was very, very nice in August because I didn't have to train nearly as much or work nearly as hard as I normally do in August because they all got it, they know it. But that has been rough in late September and October when we have these things that we do every year and they act surprised, like, you mean we have to do a presentation about our floor community? Like, yes, every year you do this. Don't like, you should know better at this point. So that it's really nice in August, but can be rough at other times. On the flip side, having a staff that's mostly new can be rough in August and can be rough in October as they're learning to do these things, but usually pays like larger dividends in the long run as you get to see them grow and develop over their time here.
During this stressful selection process and knowing your staff, we always forget how big of a role that we have. I always forget myself in this. I'm looking at 200 candidates and then I'm looking at my community and I'm looking at the residents, but I'm always forgetting about how big of an impact on our community culture that myself and my other hall directors have. While our staff are the ones executing the events in our building and engaging with our residents, we're really the ones that are in the driver's seat, taking them on that journey in order to get that done. So we shouldn't underestimate our impact on our culture of our building or our staff. We set the tone and then we set the tone for the building with how we interact with our students, whether it's emails, those virtual programs, all of it. All right, so we discussed the logistics of file review.
And we've discussed philosophies of hiring and what you should look for.
Now let's talk about the actual pool of candidates.
Yeah. So the bullet point on there says the wrong way to hire. The answer is there isn't really a wrong way to hire. You know, the wrong way to hire is to not do any of the work and ask your colleagues the day before, like, oh, who are you hiring? Okay, I'll write them down on my list and try and get them hired too from my building. But there's really no wrong way to hire. We can't stress the importance of reviewing files on your own. And even if you get help from another colleague or somebody else that you sit with and you just bounce ideas off of, always be sure to review those files yourself. If somebody passes you a name like, hey, I think this person would be really good for your community, make sure to read that file yourself first as well so you know what you're getting and it's not just a surprise. While that's good and it's nice that somebody has a thought for you, make sure that you're collecting that data and that information yourself. So if you do the research, if you do all this, everything else will fall into place. Everyone looks for different things. So don't feel pressured into certain candidates or certain philosophies because that's what everyone else is doing.
A candidate could be a great candidate, but not great for your community. As we talked about earlier, the whole genesis of this presentation for you is that Rick and Rose hire completely different people. That doesn't mean either of us are wrong in what we are doing. We're just looking for different things and need different things for our respective communities.
We talk about the top 10 is generally, some schools have real like top 10s, like they say like these 50 candidates need to be hired before everyone else. That's not what we're referring to with this. We're talking about like the top candidates that you hear about from everyone, like, oh, this is the, you know, this person killed it during interview weekend. So if you are going through your selection process and you are finding that your candidates don't really fit in with that group, don't feel bad. This one's the hardest one to wrap your head around, but the easiest pill to swallow. Once you've settled on your own candidates independently, you'll find that the top 10, whoever the best candidates are, isn't really your business. So I talk to one of our other colleagues here, his name's Jason, all the time about this, is that we think we know what we're doing when we go into selection, but if you evaluate those top 10 candidates a year later, once they've actually been in the job, a lot of times you'll find variance in their performance. So these are all selections from, it was like January 2017, I hired for the 18-19 year. I had two candidates, their names were Joseph and Margaret, who I had to fight tooth and nail to get hired for my building. Everybody wanted them. I wanted them. They were top 10 people. To my benefit, quote unquote, they were both engineering majors and both expressed interest in being in the engineering living learning community. So I got to hire both Margaret and Joseph. A year later, Margaret and Joseph were both gone for different reasons, and I didn't fire them. They just, one quit the job and the other was so unbelievably bad that eventually we were like, okay, like we can't come back next year. You can't come back. On the flip side, in this same selection process, I hired a girl named Hannah that nobody wanted. She was on nobody's list. She was on nobody's backup list. She was going to be an alternate until I picked her up. And she just won RA of the Year for our entire university last year. So the top 10 is nice. And sometimes there's good there, but not always.
So that's it. Now we're in it. We're in the selection process. And there's always that type of quote unquote etiquette when going into the selection room.
So sorry, I lost my place. So talking about the culture of the selection changes year to year and school to school. So who do you share information with? How much do you share? What do you share? Do you pass names along? Who do you pass those names along to? Like all of that changes, all of that. There's a lot of, things there, a lot of political and personal things there. So it's important if you're new at the institution, if you're, in your first few years there, it's important to ask older peers at your institution how this goes. Talk about the culture of selection with them. And also recognize that you can change the culture yourself when you get there.
And then there are a few things that you also want to ask. Go into your returners or your supervisors. How are you allowed to debate for or against a candidate? This is another thing. It's important to share information. Is it important to share information outside of the selection room, or is it strictly only allowed to be talked about when you're inside of the selection room and you're ready to hire? Does your department seek that outside feedback? You're in the room and somebody wants to hire your hall council, community council president. Are you jumping in and saying, I don't know? Or are you making sure that you're only sticking to exactly what you got there? These are the questions that you should be asking and trying to learn about before the first selection. And if you've been around long enough, or if you're brand new like me and you're continuously asking the executive director, why do we do this the way we do this? I'm just wondering, because ask those questions. We want to know. We want to know why we do this, and maybe that's just the old way of doing it, or that's just the way you did it in person. We need a completely new etiquette for how you're going to do it over Zoom.
Yeah. All right, so our last learning objective, broaden your knowledge about why a specific student works best in a specific community. So you've asked the questions about the culture and the etiquette of selection. You've come prepared for war.
You get into the room, and of course, there's always that year where 2/3 of your selections are contested.
So what do you do, Rick and Rose? What do I do when that situation comes to pass?
Here are best practices for our experiences with candidate conflicts.
Yeah. If you click the thing, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
If you did it right, if you followed a lot of the things that we talked about, you know, a lot of these answers will come to you naturally. A lot of this is you already know what the answers are.
And that is, you've done the 200 person read, 500-page essay in 14 days on these candidates.
If you've approached it with the right mindset and think that you've found candidates that strike a balance between what your community needs, what your staff needs, and what you're trying to infuse into your community, then you might not get a candidate, but if you approach it with the right mindset, if your process is good, if your foundation is solid, then everything will fall into place as it should. And so to give some examples from our experiences and where sometimes we've done the homework and other times we haven't. I'll go way back to January 2015, my first selection process. I went into this with my co-supervisor for our RA staff. And we had this candidate named Nathan, who we really wanted this guy. He was a perfect mix between me and my supervisor, and we were really excited to work for him. He was contested. We get there and we sit down with another hall coordinator, and they say, you know, our supervisor sits down and is like, okay, like why should you get him? And we were like, oh, he's really like, we just think that we'd work really well with him. He's a good mix between what Stephen brings to the table and what I bring to the table. And then we asked the other person that wanted him, and they said, well, you know, he's an athlete and my building is primarily athletes, so I think that he'll be able to connect with them. On the flip side, he talked about being really introverted, which will be really well to help him connect with these other students in our community that aren't as outgoing as the athletes. And it was a demolition. We just got completely demolished. We never stood a chance. Immediately it was like, all right, well, Nathan's going to their community instead. And so fast forward 2 years, I learned from that experience. January 2017, I go into a selection process here at WVU, and I really want this candidate named Kadra. She's really strong. She'd be really good for my community. If I'm being honest, since I already talked about it, she was a little Miss Sunshine. So I was definitely feeling a certain weakness that really wanted to hire this person. But I came prepared. I talked about why that natural friction between her and my engineering majors would be good for my community and help these people all to grow and develop together. My colleague came in, and they, in a very odd twist, they were pursuing an undergraduate art degree after getting a master's in higher education. They had a class with this student, and they were like, oh, I have class with them and I really like them. So you can see, not always coming prepared can hurt your chances. That was really the only reason they had. One last example. Sometimes we do everything right, everything exactly right, and still we don't succeed. And so another year later, January 2018, I come into a selection process and I've got all of the reasons right. Everything, all the homework, everything is fit for why this engineering major should be in my building and be in my engineering LLC. And ultimately, I felt that my colleague had better reasoning. I thought that they needed that candidate more, and I eventually ceded them over to the other community. So,
for me, I am a Cougar Cub. I am Concur. Some of you might have seen me at Concur. I've lived the Concur life. Undergrad, grad school, I was there. That's why I'm trying to get into Makuho. I heard it's just as good, of course. But the only Akuho thing I've ever done was going to Glakuho for Concur as the AD NRHH. So I am dead set on Concur, and there is one community council president, all right, who decided that he wanted to go to Concur too, fell in love with that lifestyle, because we all know that Concur and Akuoi, it's a lifestyle, it is. And he fell in love with it as well. I was like, yes, and he's applying to be an RA, this is perfect. And the other person, the other RHC that wanted him was like, you know, we need males. And there were so many female candidates and just not enough male candidates. But I'm Italian New Yorker. I'm gonna fight. I'm not gonna give up. So I said, all right, let's talk about it. And we talked about it, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna just see you in the selection room. So we went to the selection room the next day, talked about it some more, and I said, how about we sit down? If you can't find another male candidate that works perfectly, you could totally have this candidate. And we found somebody, and that student ended up on my staff, and now he's the NRHH representative, and it just worked out so well. So that was a good small win. I like that we say winning or losing, as though there are really any winners or losers.
So
we are moving into an activity, not by higher education properties. We're not splitting you up into groups, and we're not doing a whole kind of discussion on it. Instead, it's kind of like a work on your own. So I'm stop sharing. I love a work on your own. I don't know about y'all, but I am a work on your own kind of gal. Ooh, that is a long link. I hope y'all can click on that.
hey, Emily, I don't know if you saw in the chat, she said we have 5 minutes left.
We have 5 minutes left. All right. So instead of that, you're just going to click on that link right there, and you're able to do that on your own because you now have the link. But it's something that Rick and I put together, just a way to get us thinking about what we really look for, why candidates are good for us, bad for us, anything like that.
The idea was that we were going to have, you work independently and review those files and then come back together and talk about like, who are the people that you're trying to hire? Why are those the people that you're trying to hire? But instead of talking faster, I guess we took longer to go through the information today. So
I felt like we were talking pretty fast, but that's okay. So just wrapping it up, going back to just saying our learning outcomes, we had better ways to sift through candidates, building a better community for our RA staff, discussing candidates during the selection process, and then broadening our knowledge on why a specific student works best for our community.
all right, are there any questions? Anything that people wanted to talk about?
I guess wondering if everyone is doing it virtually or some people, some in person, some virtually, as you're thinking about selection.
WE can start since we're unmuted, of course, but we are doing everything virtually, it seems like, but Rick has so much more detail on that.
Yeah, our interview weekend is going to be virtual 100%. And our, like, the process that we usually do with our hall coordinators is also going to be virtual. Now, usually like the culture of our hall coordinators here is like people talk of, like, we usually had like we would all get dinner, a bunch of the RHCs, and talk about what candidates we were looking to hire. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know how we're going to change that, but we're also like 3 months away from it.
We do virtual at Temple as well. We do a very much rubric-based selection process. We are finally now, because of this, looked at our group process, which wasn't actually a group process. We changed it to being a case study kind of thing, but we're getting rid of it, which I am so happy about because I am team no group process. But we are doing it all virtually in a Saturday, very similarly.
I'm also team no group process, Brad, but I have not won that battle yet.
Why?
Good.
I'm just sorry, David. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem.
Why? This is being recorded, so we can talk about it later.
So my question is, I have two questions. One, with that, who would you choose activity? Is that an activity that you would actually do with the RLCs, or are you doing that with RAs or candidates typically? Is the one that you just sent us the link to?
I know for me, when I was applying to be an RA, this is the exact activity that I did in my group process.
Right. Okay. And then wondering, since group process is going to continue, how are you going to manage that in the virtual space?
still trying to work through that. And again, still trying to get rid of it personally. But right now, some of the opposing forces are talking about breakout rooms and things like that over Zoom. And I've been trying to present the reasons why, and we're just working through it. We're working through it right now. I don't know what's going to happen in January, but we'll see.
Has any school been able to figure it out?
I think breakout rooms can work. I mean, I use them a lot. It just depends on how you facilitate it, right? So I hear what you're saying, Patrick, about the group process it can be a little rough because it depends on your personality. It's that always, I think from the beginning, it's always a challenge, just depending upon your personality, who stands out, who doesn't. And so that I understand that if that's one of your reasons, I'm thinking that's part of it. But I think that the breakout rooms can work. You just have to make sure that if you're doing a case study or facilitation, if you have enough people to be in there to just monitor what's happening, that I think can work. So I think the breakout rooms can work because you also want to see how people are in a group setting. It is important, right? Because they're going to be on teams. So I think just making sure how it's executed and that it's executed the right way, I think you should still get the stuff that you might want to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I know that we are hitting time, unfortunately. I'm throwing Patrick and my email into the chat because we love this conversation. Of course, we did a whole PowerPoint on it. So if anybody wants to just continue throwing ideas back and forth or just talking about it, venting about it, we're here. We'd love to get on. We use Teams all the time. So if you're interested in Teams. And then please don't forget to do the survey with the survey link. I know that's super important to me. This is my first presentation I've ever done before at a conference. So that feedback would be super helpful because I'd love to do this again. Patrick?
I mean, yeah, exactly what she said. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. We appreciate your time, and we're thankful that you were here.
Thank you.